my friends. I wanted to make some kind of preview coming into the second week of the World Championship group stage, and I wanted to just take a look at what we can potentially derive from the matchups that are coming up. I'm going to do it according to the schedule on LoL Esports, so I'm going to say this is day 1, this is day 2, and we're just going to start off with Group B. Group B is the group with Longzhu on top. They are the team that has beaten everyone. They are 3-0. Immortals coming in second with a 2-1 scoreline, only losing out to Longzhu. And then we have Gigabyte Marines with the 1-2 scoreline, beating Fnatic with their so-called cheese strategy, but also kind of legit strategy, because they did in fact shock the entire world. They've done similar things at MSI, and this is something that Gigabyte Marines are known for. They are the ones that are willing to do crazy things, and I remember MSI was very similar, and this time Worlds was very similar too. Some of the strategy haven't worked out, and that has been an interesting case to watch when it comes to Gigabyte Marines, and hopefully coming into the second week they haven't ran out of fumes yet when it comes to their cheese strategies, because I call it cheese, but I feel like cheese has such a negative connotation to it, but in reality I think they come in with new strategies, or not necessarily new, but just old school kind of revised, and it baffles a lot of enemies. And then the last place team in this group, a lot of fans are looking out for a difference here with Fnatic, but they're at a 0-3 scoreline. And when it comes to Fnatic, their games have been very, very stale, very boring. The drafts were bad in a lot of cases, especially against Immortals, the game that mattered the most in a lot of eyes. Gigabyte Marines, the game against Gigabyte Marines, they got thrown off by the fact that the enemy team got lane swept onto them. And then Fnatic against Longzhu was just a pure stomp. And that was because in both of these games, both Gigabyte Marines and versus Immortals, not versus Immortals, versus Longzhu, Fnatic just didn't know how to dive properly. They didn't know how to snowball their small advantages in tempo into actually creating a gold advantage. Usually if you don't use tempo and the fact that you outnumber the enemy to create something, the enemy team will then farm the side waves while you do so, which happened with Nasus. And then eventually he TP'd in and got a double kill for himself. And this is a big problem for Fnatic. Fnatic are also very undiverse in their playstyle, meaning they play through bottom, try to put their top laner on an island, and they don't play through mid when they can. So they are very predictable in their ways, and if they have a losing bot lane matchup, all of a sudden Fnatic as a team just kind of crumbles. So let's look at the scenarios where each team will go through. Longzhu is pretty clear cut. They would have to lose 3 games, and lose 3 games, even then most scenarios would put them in a tiebreaker. Do we imagine a world where Longzhu is going to if Longzhu is going to lose all 3 games? I sincerely doubt it, so I don't want to dwell too much into it. Immortals, if they win next 3, that is going to be a case where they qualify 2. If they win 2 matches, it's very likely that they qualify 2. Gigabyte Marines, how it gets upset, the fact that Immortals wouldn't take second. In a scenario where they wouldn't take second, it would mean that Gigabyte Marines win all their matches and Immortals lose against Longzhu and Fnatic. This would be a case where Immortals would be 0-3, Gigabyte Marines would be 4-2, and that would mean that Immortals then don't go further. And a case where Fnatic win 3 matches, very little scenarios for them as well to force anything but a tiebreaker. It would be that looking at this website, it all depends on the Immortals Gigabyte Marines game, of course, assuming Longzhu beat everyone, right? It's assuming that Longzhu goes 6-0 and Longzhu is not contributing to any other team's points in any way. So assuming Longzhu goes 6-0, Fnatic going 3-0, and then tie-breaking against a team that is going to win. But even then, in the case where Fnatic tie-break against Gigabyte Marines, didn't think about the scenario because Fnatic would tie-break against either Immortals or Gigabyte Marines if Fnatic go 3-0. There's one case where they don't even tie-break. That is the case where Immortals beats Longzhu. If Immortals beats Longzhu, they would, against Fnatic, they would be out because INT would be then 4-2 and Longzhu would be 5-1. Fnatic would be 3-3, and their chances of qualifying would then effectively be over. So very unlikely for Fnatic to go through. The game, the group seems pretty set in stone, and if anything, the most exciting game to watch would be Longzhu versus Immortals because it is the best two teams of the group. Longzhu have picked up a bit of a pace after their game against Immortals, I feel, and Immortals were definitely not too far off target when it came to the game against Longzhu. So if we have a similar level of competitiveness in the next upcoming match, then Immortals and Longzhu is the game to watch in Group B. The next group that comes in, the second day of the next week, is going to be Group C. Group C is a very exciting one. We have RNG 3-0ing the group, Samsung at 2-1 losing against RNG, and G2 being 1-2. They beat Fenerbahce, and they are currently in the third place, and then Fenerbahce is at fourth place. So Fenerbahce is in a very similar state as Fnatic. They need to win all matches and then force a tiebreaker against either Samsung or G2 to get through. Seems very, very unlikely. There's a chance where if Samsung beat RNG, even Fenerbahce 3-0ing won't put them to the next round. G2 winning 3 matches is going to put them at the 4-2 scoreline. In any situation where this is implied, there could be a tiebreaker scenario where all the teams have a 4-2 scoreline, meaning G2 beat RNG and Samsung beat RNG, and then RNG beat Fenerbahce, puts them at a 4-2 scoreline. Then Samsung would win against Fenerbahce and lose against G2, and then, all of a sudden we have a 4-2 scoreline on every team here. G2 being 1-2, need to win 3 matches to put them at the 4-2 scoreline. That could be a potential tiebreaker scenario. But in most cases, as we can see, like the green balls here mean that they qualify, right? So in most scenarios here, when they do in fact win 3 matches, it's going to put them to the next round. But a lot of these scenarios rely on the fact that Samsung lose against RNG. And the other scenarios are also where Samsung beats RNG is when RNG lose all 3 games and end up on a 3-3 scoreline. So what should we look out for here? G2 need to legitimately just put themselves in a scenario where they win all three games to realistically qualify. G2 as a team, they haven't been too bad at this tournament. I feel like they've been diverse in their strategy. I wouldn't necessarily say that they are choking or anything of the same when it comes to this World Championship. I feel like their opposition is just their opposition are teams that can actually reach semifinals, if not even contest the best teams at the tournament. So RNG as a team has been absolutely fantastic. Samsung, you can see the same for them, except maybe their game against RNG where they got outdrafted. G2, the scenario where they lose to RNG and go through. This would be the case where Samsung lose all games. This would mean that Samsung just lose 3 matches and straight up G2 would qualify with a 3-3 scoreline. So Samsung would be at 2-4 and then G2 wouldn't tiebreak against Fenerbahce because they have a 2-0 scoreline against them. So all these scenarios to me seem very, very unlikely. G2 would realistically need to win 3 games to get through the next round. Will it happen? I doubt it. I think the exciting thing for me here in this group is going to be RNG versus Samsung. It could be an insane storyline here where G2 just come in and take wins off of RNG and Samsung, and that is the beauty of best of one, as well as the bitterness of best of one is that it can go either way. And even though I believe Samsung and RNG are better teams, you can really see that in a longer series a lot more. So G2 coming into this week of play, they need to win 3 matches. Samsung and RNG seem pretty set. The main thing here is that Samsung versus RNG, their match against each other, is going to be quite exciting because when it comes to Samsung, they got severely outdrafted, I would say, in their matchup against RNG. And I think in a world where Samsung draft a bit better and they don't go for the Twitch account where they got heavily pushed into the turret and Uzi just took over the game, I think this matchup might become a lot more competitive than we saw the last time. I think that settles it for Group C. We expect RNG to take first. Well, you could argue that Samsung might take first too. It all comes down to their match against each other. They might tiebreak and fight for a first seed, which will be quite interesting. I think RNG has looked like hot fire, you know. So I'm gonna put my vote on RNG taking first here. And I think when it comes to it, if Samsung clear up their draft, I think it's going to be a lot more competitive than the last time. So this group, if you in some world could change your pick and go back in time, then 1, 2, and 3 and 4. It would pretty much be the same thing that is pictured here. The next broadcast day is going to show Group A, which is the group with SKT and C9. Most groups in this World Championship have been pretty settled by the first week. In a scenario where SKT are 3-0, so they pretty much need to just win 1 game to qualify. You can see only beats. It means that they go 1-2 in the next upcoming week. If they go 4-2 in every scenario, they will just go through. So SKT are pretty settled in stone. C9, they could potentially tiebreak against SKT for the first, which is also very unlikely. I think there's no world where SKT is going to drop a match in this group. C9 are pretty set in stone as well. They can, you know, if they are in a scenario where they lose 1 match, they are settled. So a 2-1 scoreline is what C9 is kind of hoping for, and SKT losing against nobody. So SKT going 6-0 would be the positive thing here for C9. In a case where they lose, you know, the main thing here is that EDG, which arguably is the 3rd place team in the group, are 0-3. So that is a really strange situation. And C9, because their only competition is AHQ need to win 1 more match than C9. So HQ's matchup against C9 is going to be super important, because in the end, if C9 beats AHQ, HQ have no way of catching up the C9 scoreline. So let's say C9 only beat AHQ, which means that C9 will lose their match against EDG, and SK Telecom would put them at the 3-3 scoreline. HQ would then have lost against, of course, HQ, in the case where they lose against C9, would be at a 1-3 scoreline, and let's say they miraculously beat SK Telecom and EDG, which puts them at the 3-3, and even then they lose the tiebreaker against C9 because they then have lost 2 games against Cloud9. EDG, if they win 3 matches, there might be a scenario where they don't go through. You know, there's this, they would force a tiebreaker pretty much in almost all of these scenarios. And the main thing here is, of course, if they have the 3-0 finish and let's say C9 beat SK Telecom, then all of a sudden C9 can put themselves ahead, even though EDG take 3 games. And all of these potential tiebreakers are with AHQ or with C9, and it depends on the matchup with AHQ and C9 who they tiebreak against. But in a case where C9 beat SKT, then C9 will automatically beat out any chances of EDG going through. So the matchup of this group that we need to look out for the most is AHQ versus C9, and then EDG. It's a tough spot for them because I think as a team they're not that bad. That's just their mid laner has been getting caught a lot, and they've lost a lot of games in the later stages of the game. I don't know if you could attribute that to choking. I think iBoy has played phenomenally. I think Mako has been kind of underwhelming. A lot of supports got very hyped up coming into the tournament, and maybe it is the meta that doesn't allow them to shine too much, but there hasn't been too much pressure into mid. When it has happened, Scout has ended up ahead and done great things, but Scout giveth and Scout taketh. So when it comes to Scout as a player, I feel like he's very inconsistent when it comes to his performance in later stages of the game. I feel like early on he does great in his lane phase, but then again he played 3 games with Lucian. HQ versus C9, that is a matchup to look out for. If C9 beat HQ, then all of a sudden they're going to go through to the next round, and it's going to be SKT C9 to top the group. I think there's a big chance that EDG might get 3rd in this group. I think HQ are looking like the last place team. Their win against EDG was very wonky, and HQ, I feel like it is the most uninspired team at the World Championship. They are very uninspired. Wester was very underwhelming, and macro-wise they look very weak, and it just looks like they just beat themselves more than anything coming into this tournament. So HQ, I think there's a big chance EDG might topple them and go past them and take the 3rd place spot in this group. Alright, so we have that settled. SKT, C9, HQ. I think EDG will take 3rd and HQ will be 4th. Last group. So this is the most exciting one, according to many, according to me as well. Group D is going to be a crazy one, regardless of how you want to view it. So the beauty of this is that Flash Fools, even though they have a 0-3 scoreline, they as a team, they are quite good. I don't think you can go into a game and assume that you're going to beat Flash Fools as if you play against Fenerbahce or something. You don't come in as a heavy favorite in this group to beat out Flash Fools, even though they are a 0-3 score team, and they definitely deserve to be there. They are slightly worse than the others. They can still shake this up quite a lot and take away games from the other teams in this group. So the beauty of this group is that we have kind of a rock, paper, scissors thing going on for us. We have World Elite losing against TSM, World Elite stomping Misfits, and then Misfits beating TSM. So it's kind of going around in a circle here where all the teams have beaten each other. So in a scenario where a team here goes for get 2 wins, so if any team here gets 2 wins, they're going to just qualify right off the bat. We might have one scenario where all teams go 4-2, and we have a triple-way tie, and then we have, I think it's the game time that's going to be the big deciding factor between who wins tiebreakers, etc. And it is going to be a scenario where basically what happened in the first week is going to happen again. They beat each other in a circle, and you know, they beat each other in a circle, and it's going to go around again. And I think the deciding kind of, deciding factor would be the game time according to the rule set. So there's a chance that we have a triple-way tie here. What we have to look out for the most is like every game is going to matter so much here. That is what is the best part about this group. Every game is going to matter. Misfits as a team have picked up a lot of heat. I feel like World Elite have been ahead of the curve when it comes to the pick and ban phase, but we're going to talk about that a little bit further into the video. World Elite has been ahead of the curve when it comes to the pick and ban. They played a lot of Janna, a lot of Xayah, and World Elite as a team have played phenomenally well. I feel like it's hard to point to them and say that they have a particular weakness. I feel like the LPL top laners are not that great, but I feel like 7. I can't remember his name now. World Elite's top laner. He's the one that has impressed me the most coming from the LPL, and I think his name is 957, and he has the tank meta set down, and it feels like he is very settled in his role in his team. And in general, I feel like World Elite is a very, very powerful team and the best team in this group. They lost their game against TSM, but that was a very, very long game that World Elite, if I remember correctly, they made some mistakes that gave TSM a lot of breathing room, and TSM had a composition that scaled very well into the late game, if you remember the Stana match, TSM as a team, I feel like their victories against Flash Wolves and World Elite have been like these massive stall-out games. I think TSM as a team, at this tournament at least, has been more wary and waiting for enemy mistakes more than anything, and I think that could be an issue for TSM. I don't feel like they put themselves in the driver's seat from the get-go, where they are the ones that take charge of the game. So I feel like that could be a massive setback for them. TSM has been great in late game decision making. The main thing here for me is that World Elite and Misfits are playing at a higher pace. Misfits had their victory against TSM, which was a very slow and grueling match, and then the game against Flashers was very quick and clean. So my main problem with TSM is that they are very, responsive. They are not proactive, they are reactive, and I think that could pose a great threat. They've managed to win 2 late game games, and you have to give props to TSM for that skill. And I think coming into the next round of it, a lot of teams are going to change their pick and ban phases to be all about heavy pushing bot lanes and mid laners that can be more impactful in the early game. So that is kind of a good segue into what I believe the pick and ban is going to be. The main thing here is, I want to kind of outline which champions I believe have been a problem for a lot of teams. There's a lot of cases where you come into a tournament and you have to reassess the strength of a champion. And I think, my final prediction here for Group D is going to be that TSM are the one that get third. And that is basically purely on the fact that they have been very reactive in their victories, and I feel like they could be more proactive. And I think a big part of that is the way they've drafted. They draft and they play to their win conditions, so you could argue that they are playing correctly. They only have like 1 tank and Gnar split pushing and all this jazz. TSM individually, I think they played phenomenally, and I feel like if they play a draft that has a higher pace, I feel like they're going to be the team that gets second. But if they don't, I feel like they are going to be the team that get third. And that is the crazy thing about this group. Like, it could go any way. It could be like Flash Wolves beats you, and all of a sudden you aren't at the 4-2 scoreline like you hoped, and you are at the 3-3 scoreline, and all of a sudden the entire group gets shooked up. So the main thing is that the Group D is going to be crazy. The beauty of this, I want to pinpoint one game that's going to be amazing, but every game here is going to be amazing, and every game is going to matter until the end. So Group D is going to be quite exciting. Group D is going to be absolutely crazy, and I think World Elite and Misfits are going to be the teams that go through. But this is purely based on the fact that TSM have drafted reactive comps, played reactively, and I am basing this off of my assumptions, off of the drafts that will come in to the next week. So the main thing I want to bring up is Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath, under the hands of the Koreans, has looked absolutely phenomenal, has looked crazy and looked strong, and you see all them Cho'Gath luls in the team, or not in the Twitch chat, where Cho'Gath one-shots a carry, and Cho'Gath as a champion reminds me of Darius at Season 5 Worlds. His raw numbers are absolutely crazy and bonkers, they're absolutely crazy, but in the wrong scenarios, these numbers aren't used for anything. So Cho'Gath is a big blob of stats. That's what he is, right? He's a big blob of stats. He can throw some CC down that he can follow up very, very well. And the games that Cho'Gath has had the most success in is when the team that he's on is a team that can use the fact that he can push a lot of the matchups early, when he can use the fact that he has very powerful spells when they land and he can follow up. Then those scenarios are where Cho'Gath can actually do marvelous things. But in a case where he doesn't have that tank, and the enemy team has a lot of kiting potential, when the enemy team have these long range ADs and the supports that are good into it, then Cho'Gath falls in favor. As long as Cho'Gath, when Cho'Gath has less people to eat in terms of fighting against melee champions, he's going to have a harder time. So for example, Cho'Gath in a melee support matchup is phenomenal, right? Because his feast works very well on Alistar, on Braum. They go through his shield, they go through Alistar ultimate. There's a lot of melee supports that are bad into Cho'Gath, for example. But then you have, in the current state of the game, everyone's playing Kog'Maw, Twitch, Xayah, AD carries that are very good against Cho'Gath, supports that are very good against Cho'Gath. You got the Janna, you got the Lulu. You could argue that Tarek is not the greatest, but even there, most champions are just good against Cho'Gath. So Cho'Gath inherently is a big blob of stats, and something that we've seen as well is Cho'Gath blind pick has been punished, so his strength in lane is not necessarily guaranteed. A big upside for Cho'Gath was that you blind picked him, and all of a sudden, you're fine in the top lane no matter what. And Cho'Gath has been punished by Trundle quite heavily. Trundle, his ultimate is perfect against Cho'Gath, and on top of that, his pillar is perfect too. Cho'Gath as a champion can get caught very easily, and he can't really counter engage. He can't do much more than that. When he gets pillared, he's stuck and is kind of forced to fight, and that is also a big upside to Trundle. We've also seen some Jace. Jace has also been very successful against Cho'Gath, and I feel like Cho'Gath is going to fall out of favor. So that is first. Cho'Gath is going to be less prioritized coming into the second week. I feel like, if anything, teams should start banning these Trundles and these Jaces, and then they should just pick Maokai early. I think Maokai as a champion is way more diverse than Cho'Gath and can round off most compositions very well, and Maokai scales very well into games, and always can fulfill a very beneficial role in the team. I feel like Maokai is absolutely Maokai is just a great champion. So I'm expecting the blue side teams that have to blind pick a top laner to ban Trundle Jace. We've seen that a couple of times, and then pick the Maokai. And I think it's going to work out a lot better. I think some teams might also maybe blind pick Gnar in these cases, and might want to put themselves in better situations than some other teams. The next thing that I want to bring up is Sejuani. Sejuani is a champion that has 35% win ratio at the World Championship. And that isn't necessarily because Sejuani is bad. It's just that the trade-off that people are committing themselves into in a lot of cases. Sejuani first picking it is not that exciting because Gragas as a champion has been more successful at this tournament. And you could argue that Both champions have a place in the meta. Of course they do. They are both tanks and they can abuse Cinderhulk and they can jungle into most things. Gragas has been more successful, and the reason why I feel is Sejuani has been traded very, very highly for a lot of other things. So there was scenarios where Sejuani was traded for Jarvan. There was scenarios where Sejuani was traded for the better AD, and I think this was the big mistake. I don't think Sejuani is high enough tier to justify trading it for any of the other power picks. And in a lot of those cases, the enemy team got Gragas and priority to pick on support, and it just put them in a better scenario. They were allowed to pick Gragas and the better AD, and it just put them in a better scenario because Gragas and Sejuani are equally impactful. If Gragas is not more impactful, because the stats speak for themselves, right? Gragas has a higher win ratio. I'm just gonna double check his win ratio at the tournament. So Gragas has a 69% win ratio at this tournament, right? So that is crazy, considering like he's been picked 36 times, and that is a juicy number for our fat man in the jungle. So Gragas, you know, Sejuani's win ratio being low makes sense that Gragas is so much higher. So I expect more Gragas priority than Sejuani, if anything, and hopefully we will see more of that. Something that I want to highlight too, we're going to talk about the bad champions first, is Ryze has been picked a lot. And Ryze as a champion, he is running into this issue where he is very good in mid lane, but he's not good in the game. So in a lot of these cases, you know, he's good at killing tanks and he's good at melting a front line. He's not the best mid laner to deal with a lot of these AD carries, and this is what the meta is about. You know, you reach that breaking point in the game where AD carries just take over. They have a long range advantage, and that is where Ryze runs into a lot of difficulty. He has he has range, right? But it's hard for him to trade with AD carries. It's hard for him to deal with the range supports and the range AD carries, the long range ADs, and this puts Ryze in a weaker spot than he would be in a different meta. The beauty of Ryze is that he's very good at killing tanks, right? So that is a very good point about him, and he's also good in the mid lane, but it seems like teams have been more successful with other picks. I think when it comes to the mid lane, what we should expect to see more of, we should expect to see more of these picks that can kind of peel in that sense, provide a lot of CC and be very impactful in the early game, or just be good on side. So sure, Ryze fits there, and it could be a pick that is continued to picked, and I feel like maybe the win ratio is a bit skewed because some teams haven't executed Ryze properly. I think though, when it comes to other champions, I feel like the other champions can be more impactful. And the main champions I want to highlight in mid lane, what I'm expecting us to see more of, is the Galio, is the Taliyah, and is the LeBlanc as well. So the reason I think Galio and Taliyah are fantastic is that they can push early and they can create a lot of pressure. I feel like the pace at the World Championship has been very low, and I think this is going to change. I feel like teams are going to recognize that it's all about pushing bot lane early, and I feel like teams are going to pick champions that facilitate this. Teams are going to pick Galio and Taliyah, the champions that can push very early on and then create a lot of pressure. The main thing here is that Galio is super powerful on red side. So Gigabyte Marines, they picked Galio red side, and at the time I didn't think too much of it, but Galio on red side, if we talk about the blind pick champions that people are picking top lane, it's the Cho'Gath, it's the Maokai, and Galio has a fine matchup into these, and you can almost always send Galio into mid lane, worst case scenario. And Galio as a champion has an incredible win ratio of 77% at this tournament with 22 games picked. So that is absolutely incredible. And the main thing here is for me is that Galio can create a lot of pressure in the early game. He can also be sent into top lane if you are uncomfortable playing him in the mid lane. He's a flex pick, and I think a lot of red side teams are going to try to pick him. I think when it comes to blind picking mid lane, I think we will see more and more Talia. Talia as a champion, and some of the Korean teams have played Talia, and I think when it comes to Talia, she got this nerf on her mana costs, and it doesn't seem too impactful on what she wants to accomplish. We've seen 20 bans on Talia and 7 picks, and she is at an 85% win ratio, which isn't like that big of a deal because she's only been in 7 games. But I feel like she fits into this narrative of what people expect from a mid laner at this point in time. And my main issue with what has been going on at the World Champion is how slow the games have been. The games have been very, very slow, and I feel like the games are going to pick up a lot of pace. So we talked about Cho'Gath and Sejuani going down in value. Something that I think we will see less and less of as well is the Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw, while he does well into these tank champions and does well because he spikes earlier than a lot of champions, is that in the games that Kog'Maw loses is that he falls behind because he's pushed into the turret and the enemy team is just using their priority from bottom to create a lot of good situations. So Kog'Maw as a champion, he can trade very well, but he doesn't push very well. And I think bottom is going to turn into a push fiesta coming into the next one. I think the reason Xayah as a champion has had a lot of success is that she scales incredibly well as well. She doesn't necessarily have some kind of, oh, she falls off now and the enemy AD is going to be much better. There's always the potential of Xayah creating something big. She can kill tanks very well. She has her feathers. She has a very powerful utility ultimate, and she pushes early on. That is the main strength of Xayah, and this is a segue to my next part of this as well. Bot lane has been all about pushing, so been all about pushing, and with that in mind, Xayah has been a strong component when it comes to that. She has a kit that allows her to push a lot of matchups, and if anything, I feel like we might see some Sivir. I think Sivir might come back into the bot lane, and I think the main support that we need to look out for coming into the next week of play is Janna. Janna has been the champion that people pick second. Lulu has been the champion that people picked over Janna, and even in that case, people picked other champions into Lulu. I think Janna is completely OP with the right AD. Twitch, for example, not Twitch, I meant Xayah Janna, for example, is like the new Sivir Janna. They just perma push. And I think the response to Xayah is to play the Sivir and the Janna and be the ones pushing bot lane and taking charge of that bot lane and pushing bot lane. And I think that is why Xayah has been so powerful. Janna has been so powerful as well because she leads the charge on most bot lanes, and she scales. Arguably, she scales better than Lulu into later stages of the game. Her ultimate is very, very powerful. And I just want to double check here Janna's win ratio. I remember it was absolutely crazy. Janna's win ratio this tournament is 80% with a 30 pick ratio. If you compare that to Lulu, Lulu is at a 38% win ratio. So this kind of speaks for itself. You know, we don't have that big of a sample size. You know, sure, it's been about, I don't know, maybe 50 games, counting the play-ins, maybe a bit more. And if we consider that, then of course the sample size isn't that massive, but it's something that is worth to pay attention to. And I think if anything is going to change in the AD role is that the Xayah priority is going to go up, all the way up. And I think Sivir might also have a showing. I think Kog'Maw is going to go down in priority. I think Twitch, Xayah, and Sivir are going to be the ADs to play at the World Championship. So I want to continue to the top lane. You know, we talked about how the freaking Cho'Gath thing has been a trap. We talked about how Jace and Trundle is going to be the blue side bans, and then Maokai Gnar as a matchup we're going to see a lot of this tournament, I believe. I think, yeah, that pretty much settles it, you know, with the top lane. We talked about everything there. I think LeBlanc as a champion is something that has been going under the radar, people think LeBlanc is something that falls off heavily, and partially I agree with this, but partially I disagree, because you know, the later she comes into the game, the more of a threat she becomes in side lane, and LeBlanc is really powerful right now, together with Twitch, because they are very good at killing Ardent Sensor supports. Being able to kill the Ardent Sensor support, you know, it's kind of strange that League of Legends has turned into a game where, you know, it's similar to like Heroes of the Storm or Overwatch, where the support needs to die first, otherwise, you know, you're going to be, they're going to just do too much of value. And, you know, if you kill a support early on in the fight, that means so much. That means so incredibly much, and LeBlanc is very good at doing that. LeBlanc is also a side lane threat, and she's very good early game. Maybe she falls off at the point where she has like 2 items and people have some MR and she's building towards her Void Staff. This is like the most problematic time for LeBlanc, if anything. And I think LeBlanc is going to have a lot more play. I think Orianna as a champion as well is something that is going to see more play, because to me, Orianna is a great blind. I think Orianna is potentially the best mid laner into these long range ADs, and can also deal with them in mid lane, can farm it out on mid lane. We've seen also Syndra do that. But I feel like Orianna is just better than Syndra, because she can actually play that role where she just shields her AD, provides speed, and can also provide a lot of utility. And I feel like in a lot of these fights, the CC can be very clutch, and the fights where Syndra has been the most useful isn't because of her burst or whatever. It's more about her E hitting a lot of people. And the main thing here for me is that I feel like Orianna is a bit better than Syndra. And I think LeBlanc and Orianna and Talia and Galio are the mid laners to play right now. And, you know, I think that pretty much settles it. If we want to summarize it, you know, bottom, AD, I think Xayah, Twitch, and potentially Sivir coming back. Support, I think Janna is going to be first picked a lot more. I think people are going to drop this idea that they need to first pick Sejuani. I think first pick Janna is going to be a real thing when Xayah is not out. Like Xayah is in, I mean, Xayah is going to be first picked, and then maybe the counter to Xayah is to pick Sivir Janna, even a harder pushing bot lane. But the main thing here is that it kind of balances out. You know, if you have Xayah pushing and Sivir pushing, they both kill the wave and no one's really accomplishing much. And those are scenarios where you could argue that Xayah is going to scale better into the game, Sivir is going to scale better into the game. I think there's arguments for both. And I think Sivir as a champion is going to definitely have a place in the bot lane. Mid lane, we talked about Talia, Galio, and of course LeBlanc and Orianna. Top lane, I think we will see less Cho'Gath. And jungle, I think we will see less Sejuani. I think that settles it. Most exciting group for us is going to be Group T, which is going to be the last day of group stages. Hopefully this was some kind of insight. I just did this impromptu. I just wanted to kind of refresh my own mind coming into this week's group stage. Hopefully it was helpful in any way. I'll see you guys on the Rift.